Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode, Revenge of the Man Crab, is, it's interesting in that, we find out a bit more about, it's interesting for another reasons, which is that, we kind of find out Fred's true feelings toward Daphne, at least somewhat, because of something that happens in the episode, and, also we get a bit more of a glimpse into Angel's Dynamite's past, possibly, because, she has an interesting reaction when she's asked to help the kids, and I'll get to that in a minute, But first and foremost, it starts off with two characters, Dylan and Brenda, who may or may not be based off of one of the couple from what was it, 90210. They may not be based off of those characters. They're even named similar. And Dylan at one point actually calls Brenda Bren, and they are recurring characters, which is why I list them. But in any case, they're actually setting up for a volleyball tournament. They're helping Trickles Trickwood set up for their volleyball tournament, which is apparently we find out this out, but it's apparently some sort of water-free substitute, and is supposed to be this healthier alternative to water, which yeah. I mean, anything, if you make a water-free substitute, that's kind of gross. I'm not going to be perfectly honest, considering everything has water in it. There's no way to actually avoid drinking water. Everything has water in it. Like the food that you eat, the water, your drinks, your favorite drink, your whatever, it has water in it. There's no way to create a water-free substitute. That's just gross. In any case, they're setting up for the volleyball tournament, and Brenda is very annoyed about the fact that they're still there, pointing out that she wish she didn't have to help, but Dylan merely remarks that they're there to help and set up, and that he'll get her some water when they go out, but she merely responds that she wants Trickles Trickwood, which again I respond is gross, but he merely points out that Trickles Trickwood is water, but she merely points out what I just told you, that it's a water-free substitute, and again, gross. But as they're actually discussing this, Dylan actually goes to go pack up his truck, and it's at this point where they're actually attacked by the titular man crab, which proceeds to grab Brenda and proceeds to drag her under the sand and into the sand below, and obviously Dylan at first, or at least not obviously, because Dylan at first thinks that Brenda's just messing with her, because apparently that's just something they do, and he's not entirely convinced that there's actually a man crab attacking her. So by the time he realizes that she's actually in danger, it's too late and she's pulled under the sand, and then the man crab attacks him and presumably pulls him under, because we don't see him for most of the episode after this. But in case the next morning, the tournament is now in full swing, and Mystery Inc. has actually come to the location. They're actually on the beach. They're actually admiring the volleyball tournament, and Shaggy and Scooby are just remarking about how big the turnout is, and also point out that they hope that they've saved enough food, and it's at this point where we see Bud Shelton walk by. He's wearing his mascot costume, and he's selling Trickles Trickwood to all of the people who attended the tournament. And but Scooby and Shaggy actually kind of decide that they could actually go for some actual food, and not that gross water-free substitute. So they decide to actually go to Skipper Shelton's cabin, which is revealed. It's revealed in this episode, and this is kind of an inconsistency from the last episode, except not really, because this episode reveals that Skipper Shelton serves from the window. So it's unknown as to how he's actually able. So it's unknown as to why he didn't just hand them the pizza and then through the window, and then that was the end of that. But it's possible that he was just in there for a long enough time that he didn't have enough for ingredients to make his food, let alone serve it to other people. So And I mean, we don't really know. We don't really know how long he was in there. He could have been in there all day, and his deliveries couldn't have come in because obviously his doorknob was missing, and he was just kind of keeping himself fed through his supplies, which unfortunately means he was eating into his paper thin quotas that restaurants like his have to meet. But in any case, as Scooby, Shaggy, and Velma actually go and investigate, go to the cabin to order something. Shaggy tells Velma not to bring up his nose. She points out that Velma even points out that she thinks Skipper Shelton's a bit of a creep, but Shaggy just points out that he's chill as long as you don't bring up his nose. And Velma immediately goes against that and decides to ask Skipper Shelton what happened to his nose, and he proceeds to go into this big tirade about how a clam stole his nose, and he's been shucking ever since, trying to find the clam that stole it so that he can finally have his revenge. And obviously that hasn't happened yet because obviously he's still talking about it. But in case he then greets Shaggy like an old friend, because obviously Shaggy is a regular at his restaurant as established, but asks him what he would like, and Shaggy immediately orders what is called a clam cone, but again, that's gross because putting clams in ice cream just sounds wrong on many levels. But Velma actually whispers to him that he promised to go on a diet, so Shaggy reluctantly turns down the idea of a clam cone and decides to actually turn it down. Whereas Scooby is visibly confused because Shaggy was obviously the one who brought it up that they should go to the clam cabin, and then proceeds to suggest that proceeds to just order his cone, and the trio begin to leave. But then Fred and Daphne actually show up to also order a clam cone, and Fred offers to buy Daphne one, but Daphne merely remarks that she actually has seafood allergies. As we find out, she actually ate some shrimp at her sister's wedding. Her oldest sister revealed, but and I don't really know any of their names, which is why I haven't been picturing them. But in any case, she shows up. In any case, she remarks that she was so swollen up that she didn't fit in the bridal safe room, as she puts it. But Fred relents about the fact that she's not going to get that, and decides to not get her cone, but points out that she's a safe enough distance away from all the seafood that it probably won't affect her, and she'll probably be fine. But in case, after finding out that Daphne has food allergies, Fred then proceeds to ask Skipper Shelton about his shack, pointing out that his shack is normally a couple miles in the other direction, and Skipper Shelton doesn't shy away from that. He proceeds to point out that every year, whenever they hold some sort of event, be it the volleyball tournament or whatever the hell, they actually ask him to pick up and move his entire business away from where it normally would be, so that they can set up shop. Which he points out it annoys the hell out of him. So. But in any case, he then remarks that now that he's out of clams, so that he might as well go do some shucking to actually get some more. And with that, he picks up his barrel and proceeds to just walk out the back door of his restaurant and leaves to go get some more clams. But in case after that little experience, they actually get ready to go set up and sits down in the volleyball tournament, and they actually start watching the volleyball tournament, and we find out that Angel Dynamite is actually DJing for the event, and she's actually involved in the whole situation. But there is a couple of interesting things here where Velma actually tries to scoot up to Shaggy, and Shaggy kind of tries to scoot up to her as well, but immediately Scooby shuts it down and rather obliviously, and just kind of puts his paws around them and remarks that that's a pretty fun tournament, with Velma just kind of half-heartedly remarking that it is because she's annoyed that Scooby got in her way. But and meanwhile, Daphne is just sitting there admiring the players and hoping that she's not going to see any more seafood, and obviously Fred remarks that that's a very beautiful sight, and when Daphne scolds him for ogling the girls, it's revealed that he's not, but is actually admiring the nets, and again, Fred is very obsessed with traps in this one, and once again he brings it up, just admiring the nets and wondering what their tensile strength is, and if their nylon would actually be useful in actually capturing something. Which Daphne just kind of gets annoyed at its size, and then asks Velma if she would like to head out and just go somewhere, and Velma merely remarks that she has no problem with that, since as she puts it, she doesn't feel like they'll be missed there anyway. But as they're about to leave, the man crab suddenly bursts out of the sand and starts attacking people. So yeah. The man crab, as they're actually admiring the tournament, the man crab actually shows up and starts rampaging and just starts attacking everything around it indiscriminately. And the gang actually sits there for a couple of minutes, slack-jawed in awe, because they have no idea what the man crab actually is, because obviously it's this weird thing that they don't fully understand what they're looking at, and obviously it's a very weird to look at, and eventually they land on the idea of it being a man crab, and decide to hightail it out of there, but too late, it actually winds up spying them, and actually chases them into the bleachers and starts running after them, and actually, in the process, sends them flying into the air alongside three kids. And some of the volleyball team actually catches them in the net, which is a really funny sequence. But in case Angel Dynamite sees all of this from her booth and tries to attack it with her CDs, which the man crab just kind of knocks them away and back into the booth, and then proceeds to try and rampage and attack the booth with her in it. So she just kind of runs out and cowers underneath her turntable until the man crab goes away. At which point it does, and proceeds to attack one of the volleyball girls, and proceeds to just drag her off toward the locker tent where Fred actually leads the charge against the man crab and tells them that they can't let it get away. But with Scooby and Shaggy being very reluctant to chase after the man crab, and for good reason, because it's goddamn terrifying. But in case with some dragging from Velma, they actually do wind up going off to go and fight the man crab, and confront it. But by that point, the man crab has completely disappeared, and they don't even see where it or the girl have gone. So they have no idea what to actually do. But obviously the first thing they immediately try is calling the police, where Sheriff Stone actually winds up taking a police statement from them, and Shaggy and Scooby wind up giving the police statement, and obviously that's not the best idea, because they kind of overplay how terrifying it is, and then remark how creepy it was looking at it, and obviously, and then Velma and Daphne actually wind up suggesting the very obvious solution which is to shut down the beach for the time being until they can catch the man crab. But it's at this point where Peter Trickle, the owner of Trickle's Trickwood, actually shows up and tells Sheriff Stone to not do that. Because obviously Peter Trickle's entire thing is that he thinks it would be bad for business, and he even points this out to Velma when she scolds him for not shutting down the tournament, pointing out that the truth of the matter is nobody's entirely sure what they saw, and remarks that as far as they know, it could have just been somebody who wasn't dieting using Trickle's Trickwood, which I wouldn't put that in my body, and neither should anybody else. But yeah, he just kind of points out that that Trickle's Trickwood is kind of that the Trickle's Trickwood tournament should proceed as planned, and obviously it's not that big a deal if there's a man crab rampaging around, which that does catch the gang as a little bit off and about how unconcerned he is. But in case Sheriff Stone, after hearing all the testimony, decides to do nothing, because as he points out, his police station actually isn't equipped to deal with crabmen, and just points out that the motto is to protect and serve, but not to protect and serve against crab people, and with that he just leaves. So yeah, at which point Peter Trickle also leaves and walks off, and it's at this point where they decide that the best thing to do is to actually set a trap for the crabman and actually catch him in the act. And it's actually Daphne who suggests it, but Fred actually decides to just parrot what she says, much to her chagrin, because he doesn't really have a good idea. But Velma merely points out that the first thing they should actually do is start investigating, and with that she actually finds a lead right out of the gate, which is that there's a locker full of sand, and odder yet is the fact that Skipper Shelton's name is on it. So, which immediately paints a red flag and points Skipper Shelton to be a possible culprit, since according to themselves, he was nowhere to be found, and sure enough, he wasn't. He went off to go shuck clams, supposedly. So we don't really know where he was at the time of the incident. He just kind of disappeared, didn't come back. We don't know where he is. But in case Velma then proceeds to point out that now that they know what they're doing and who their culprit is, they point out that they'll likely have to set a trap near Skipper Shelton's cabin and then go catch it that way. At which point Fred actually gets a brilliant idea, which is to use Daphne as bait. According to himself, and Daphne confirms this, she wasn't very good at it, but she did play volleyball back in the day. She did used to play volleyball, even though she wasn't particularly good at it, and kept getting knocked around by volleyballs from the opposing team. So, yeah. In any case, Fred points out that would actually make her the perfect bait, pointing out that no crabman could resist capturing her, which she remarks is kind of sweet in a weird way. And it is kind of sort of. I mean, the sentiment's there. He tried to compliment her, but the way he did it was kind of weird and creepy. But in any case, they then proceed to immediately get ready to set up the trap while Scooby and Shaggy actually keep watch on the clam cabin, and Scooby and Shaggy just kind of list all of their favorite clam recipes while they wait for Fred to finish up the trap, pointing out that they hope Skipper Shelton isn't the bad guy and that he's not actually the person they need to trap, and at which point Shaggy actually winds up shutting the conversation down, pointing out that he's not supposed to be talking about this kind of stuff anymore because of Velma, but he winds up cutting himself off, which winds up confusing Scooby a little bit. But in any case, once they're done, eventually Fred does wind up finishing the trap, and he winds up showing off everything and pointing out how what they're actually supposed to do, and points out that whoever lowers it into the trap will actually wind up stepping on a plunger, which will set up this giant spring contraption, which will trap the crab man in a giant crab pot. So, yeah, he points out that is a very simple thing, and that all Daphne needs to do for her part is to just lower it into the spot. And Daphne isn't there because she's currently changing, but so Velma actually volunteers to go get her especially after hearing Scooby and Shaggy pointing out that they would like to go back to watching the clam cones, which annoys her. And Shaggy tries to backpedal about it, but by that point the damage has already been done, so she just leaves to go investigate. At which point she goes to check in on Daphne, who is changing in the mystery machine. Daphne is actually dressed in her bikini, which has showed up in a couple of times, but it's a lot more provocative here. For lack of a better word, it's a different design to what she normally wears. It's black, it's pure purple, and it's slightly more revealing than it normally would be. But in any case, Velma points out that she looks good in it and wonders who she's showing off for, but Daphne completely denies the fact that she's showing off for anyone and merely asks Velma to oil her back for her. And while she's doing that, Velma decides to actually ask her about guy stuff and asks her if she likes a guy, which Daphne immediately goes ballistic over, pointing out that it's likely that who asked, and wonders if it's one of her sisters, but Velma immediately points out that she was just speaking hypothetically and goes back to oiling Daphne's back, and asks her a more pertinent question to her relationship. What if, which is that, if guys like being told what to do? And Daphne gives a pretty interesting response to that, which is that, I mean, personally, as a guy, not so much being told what to do, like given instruction from time to time, but we're very much like, but if we're problem solvers, we're gonna get stuff done. We're not those kind of people. But in any case, Daphne points out that her dad isn't like that. In fact, he very much relishes the idea of his wife giving him advice. As we find out, Barney Blake is not very good at taking care of himself, according to Daphne. Case in point, her mom left for a business trip that one time, and when she came out, Barney was in his underwear trying to bite open a can of food. So yeah, he was trying to bite open a can of soup, and didn't really know how to open it or what to do, or even how to change himself. So yeah, clearly Barty is one of those guys who needs instruction, but he's not. But no, most guys aren't like that. Most guys are not like Barty Blake. He's an exception to the rule. But in any case, as she's actually talking about all this, the Crabman actually winds up appearing and actually knocks out Velma and throws her in the back of the mystery machine before grabbing the bottle from her and proceeding to spray douse Daphne in it. And Daphne turns around to see who's to tell off Velma for covering her in oil, but then sees the Crabman chase after her and proceeds to actually run back toward where she knows the trap is to try and trap the Crabman and keep it from actually attacking her still. But it's at this point where Shaggy and Scooby are kind of mulling over everything, and Shaggy points out that he would actually like a snack, but Scooby decides to actually keep a secret, pointing out that he won't tell Velma, and tells Shaggy to just go for it and go grab a snack from the clam cabin. And Shaggy takes his friend's advice and immediately goes for it, but unfortunately he forgets the trap is there and winds up getting stuck in it. So yeah, with that, the trap actually winds up being sprung with him in it, and unfortunately, Daphne shows up and figures out too late that the trap has been sprung, and after Shaggy hollers at her from inside the pot. But it's at this point where the Crabman actually winds up grabbing her and proceeds to start dragging her under the sand with the rest of the gang actually the rest of the gang actually showing up and watching her too late to get dragged in the sand. And Fred and Mia has a very interesting reaction at the minute she goes under. So Fred, he's been established to not really care about Daphne, like, at all. He just kind of thinks of her as a friend and doesn't really care about her as a person, or at least he doesn't care about her in that way. But what we find out is that apparently that's because he normally focuses on the idea of building traps, and usually Daphne is there to help him with that. But so the second she goes under the sand, he is completely at a loss, doesn't know what to do, and all he can do to try and help her is immediately start pawing at the sand. And it's clear that he's completely lost without Daphne. So yeah, interesting reaction there. But in any case, Velma shows up and wonders what the hell is going on, at which point Fred tells her everything that just happened, and then goes back to pawing at the sand to try and get to her. But Velma merely points out that there's nothing they can do and that they'll have to find another way to rescue Daphne. But Fred insists that that's the only thing they can do, and that he continues to paw at the sand to try and get to Daphne. And eventually they just pick him up and move him to Angel Dynamite's radio station, where he continues pawing up everything. According to Velma, he actually even wound up pawing up the carpeting in the mystery machine on the way over, and points out that he's been like that ever since Daphne disappeared, which is interesting, and a little bit funny. But in case, Fred merely points out that they need some sort of plan, still pawing at the ground, mind you, and Velma merely points out that he's normally the one to come up with a plan, which Fred doesn't deny, but then points out that he feels that something is clearly wrong with him if he isn't coming up with plans. At which point he starts getting even more panicky. So it's at this point where Shaggy brings up the fact that he doesn't think he points out, he kind of blames his dad for the fact that Daphne got kidnapped, and points out that if he hadn't been dieting, she probably wouldn't have been dragged under by the man crab. And with that, she then proceeds to start chowing down on a bunch of junk food, which Velma isn't happy with. At which point there's suddenly a knock at the door, and Scooby immediately goes to get it and opens the door to discover an envelope with Mr. E's emblem on it. And obviously they panic and obviously Scooby has a panic attack because it's Mr. E. But in any case, he proceeds to actually pick up the envelope and brings it inside, where Shaggy is actually the one to open it, and he pulls out what's inside, which is revealed to be an old article about kids having gone missing in Crystal Cove. When Angel actually winds up seeing it, her eyes widen, and she actually snatches the article away from Shaggy and has an interesting reaction to it, where she clearly seems to know something is up, but she denies it and denies the fact that she knows the people who are in that photo. So yeah, with that, she's very skeptical. She's very confused. So yeah, that's an interesting reaction that she just has. She clearly knows something about the kids that went missing, but decides not to say anything on it, and that's a little interesting and weird. But in any case, Shaggy then notices there's something else in the parcel, and he tips it out to discover a 8-track tape, and which Fred immediately tries to play on the turntable, but he doesn't understand what an 8-track tape is, so he just kind of plays it. So yeah, he doesn't understand it, so he plays it on the wrong audio player, and it just winds up making the record sound funny, which he points out isn't working. So Angel just kind of picks him up, consoles him, pointing out that it's an old school type of tape, and it's okay that he doesn't know, and proceeds to then put it into her 8-track player, which she has. And we then hear a message from Mr. E, who basically just tells them to follow up on the letter that they were looking into, and just points out that the article is probably an interesting place to start, and tells them to look it up a little bit more, which they immediately do, and get into the mystery machine to go to the library to investigate and go through the archives that are down there. And while they're there, and while Velma is actually going through the archives, Fred is admiring all of the books in the library and points out that Daphne read a book once, which is just really, really sad and pathetic. But in case Velma tells him to shut up, pointing out that he's not helping, and eventually comes across a couple of articles. One about the founding of Trickle's Trickwood, and another about the volleyball tournament that they hold, which is that many years ago, the last time it was held, they found out that Skipper Shelton actually wound up yelling at the town for moving the shack, and vowed to get revenge if they ever did it again. Which is a very interesting thing for them to find, and that it just points more fingers in Skipper Shelton's direction, because obviously it seems pretty simple that he might be the antagonist of the episode. But as they're actually looking into it, they decide that they actually look into a little bit more into the fact that the old kids actually disappeared in the coves coves underneath the titular Crystal Cove, but which they point out is actually a pretty interesting thing to actually look into. And also during the scene, it's implied that the Crabman is actually watching them, but he disappears before they can see him. But it's interesting. But in any case, they then decide to actually go to the caverns underneath Crystal Cove and go to investigate. And immediately they do find something. First and foremost, they find a crab, which isn't the man crab, but it does attack Scooby all the same, which Scooby just shakes off his nose, and they continue going, at which point they find a giant staircase, which they point out is a little bit strange, since obviously the Crabman doesn't need a staircase, and points out that it's likely that the Crabman actually built all of this under there to actually get to the beach more easier. And Velma even points out that it's likely that the Crabman is just using a network of scaffolding to just hide under the beach and make it look like he's burrowing them under the sand. Just as an idea of what she posits as a thing. But it's at this point where they actually hear Daphne calling at them from the cage, which Fred remarks to him being hallucinating, and thinking that he's actually hearing her voice, that he's actually just hearing her voice, and because he's obviously in a very interesting state. But when he realizes it's actually her, he immediately runs off deeper into the caverns to go find her, and eventually finds her just chilling out in a cage with Brenda and Dylan, and also no sign of the other volleyball team member that they kidnapped. Interesting there, she just disappears. We don't know where she is. But Fred immediately goes to rescue her, and the second he finds out that she's safe, he's immediately back to his usual self. That interesting reaction lasted all of about 15 minutes, but it is interesting to note that he was in a very weird state while Daphne had disappeared. So yeah, methinks he cares about her a little bit more than he lets on. But in any case, he then proceeds to actually they then proceed to actually open up the cage and try to let everybody out. And it's at this point where the man crab actually shows up and starts chasing them through the cavern. So obviously now with two more members in tow, they actually start trying to hide from the cabin and trying to hide from the man crab, and actually start throwing things at it to try and distract it, which doesn't wind up working, and also just kind of starts going through walls to try and get to them. But as they're actually being chased, Scooby and Shaggy actually smells Skipper Shelton's clam clones, which they remark is likely the way out, and decide to actually sniff up the clam cones and actually follow their nose, as it were, to the exit, which does wind up working. They actually wind up running up some of the scaffolding to actually get to Skipper Sultan's clam shack, which with the Crabman following them and destroying the scaffolding in the process, which is a very terrifying, should I mention, because it's just climbing over walls and shit. But you do eventually wind up emerging from the trapdoor and out of the sand in the middle of another volleyball tournament, funnily enough, which causes all the girls obviously to panic, because a guy and his dog just emerged from the sand. But then the Crabman tries to emerge from the sand as well, but Scooby and Shaggy actually start pegging volleyballs at it, which only served to piss it off. And Shaggy even mentions that was probably a bad idea, so they immediately run to Skipper Shelton's clam shack, where they're immediately attacked by the man crab, and it tries trying to climb around the building after them. But they do eventually manage to actually lead it into Fred's trap, where it winds up getting caught in the pot, and also it's revealed that all of its limbs are cybernetic robotic parts. So yeah, Scooby and Shaggy wind up celebrating over the fact that they managed to catch the man crab, and at which point they're joined by the rest of Mystery Incorporated, who point out point out what happened and how they managed to find their way out, and Scooby and Shaggy merely remark that they just followed their nose. And when Velma realizes that it was Scooby Shaggy's addiction to junk food that led him out of the cave, she remarks that maybe she should ask it for advice instead. At which point, Fred decides to open up the clam pot with Sheriff Stone actually arriving after finding out about all the commotion, and Fred immediately opens up the pot and remarks that now that they've taught him, they can actually unmask him and figure out who he is. And Fred has a pretty good idea of who it is, pointing out that Skipper Shelton isn't around again, and proceeds to get ready to unmask him. But it's at this point where Skipper Shelton just shows up. As it turns out, he was at the dry cleaners and wasn't involved at all. At which point we find out that the guy who actually was masquerading as the Crabman was Bud Shelton. As we find out, apparently he was the Crabman all along, and as we do find out from him, according to himself, he invented Trickle's Trickwit. And Mr. Trickle actually wound up taking his idea from him. So for that reason, he decided to dress up as a Crabman and destroy his tournament. Even so, going so much as to build. He is responsible for building the scaffolding underneath the Crystal Cove Beach. He wound up building the man crab costume in his spare time using robotic parts, and he proceeds to explain and point out that he's actually trying to get revenge on him for just stealing his idea. And Velma points out that that's a pretty interesting idea, and initially nobody has any idea who this guy is or why he would want revenge. But then Velma points out that as we established earlier, he's actually the mascot of Trickle's Trickwit, and it's pretty obvious to see that he was forced to sell his own product that he invented, which is kind of adding insult to injury. But it's at this point where he merely points out that he would have gotten away with it if it weren't for the Merlin kids, and but Skipper Shelton merely remarks that almost doesn't quite shuck the clam, as he points out, and he and Scooby share a laugh, though Scooby admits that he has no idea what he's talking about. So yeah, it's kind of funny. But in case, back at Angel Dynamite's thing, they actually wind up catching up about what was going on, and Daphne actually winds up pointing out that Fred had an interesting reaction, and Velma told her about it, and Fred merely points out that he was just a funny phase, and that he won't, and as he quotes, he will never have feelings again. So which Daphne really remarks we'll see, and yeah, it was an interesting reaction. Clearly, he was very lost without Daphne, and he'll deny it, and he isn't even entirely sure if they were actual feelings, but they were. But then it's very clear that he does care about Daphne a little bit more than he thinks, and kind of just hides the fact that he actually cares about her somewhat, or at least the fact that he keeps his mind occupied with traps keeps him off the idea of Daphne, but. But in case as she's about to walk off and go join the rest of the group, Fred proceeds to actually pull out the article that they were reading in regards to the disappearances, and Daphne recognizes the article and or more accurately, she points out that she recognizes 2 of the kids from the article, and then pulls out the pendant that she found in episode 1, which is, and it's revealed that 2 of the kids from the article are actually inside the pendant, which, she points out seems to be more than just a coincidence, and points out that that's a pretty weird coincidence if that's the case, and wonders if there's actually a deeper mystery going on. And the rest of Mr. Inc. chimes in, pointing out that it seems like that their mystery has only just begun. While Angel Dynamite actually winds up turning off the sound in her booth so that she can just think about things. So yeah, this episode is interesting for a number of reasons. First and foremost, don't drink Trickle's Trickwood. If that's the kind of thing that should not exist in real life. If it does, whoever founded that real life company probably shouldn't have a job anymore. Just saying that. Whoever invented, if anybody tries to invent a water-free substitute in real life, don't. But more to the point, there's some interesting things, which is Angel Dynamite has an interesting reaction when they find the article, which is very interesting and very weird. But I think she knows more than she's letting on regarding the missing kids. And obviously, now that we know that that the pendant is connected to the missing kids in some way, then it stands to reason that there might be actually some sort of deeper mystery there. And I'm interested to see where that's going to go. But also, and this is arguably more important, Fred's feelings for Daphne are apparent in this episode. The second when she goes missing around the halfway mark, he's completely lost and has no idea what to do. And the only thing he can do is start pawing at the ground where she disappeared. It's sad and pathetic, but it does show that he cares about her more than he lets on. He kind of hides. He kind of either doesn't really show his feelings at all. Except when she's no longer around and he clearly needs her to be his guiding light, which is interesting. As long as he knows she's safe, he's fine. But the second she goes missing and gets kidnapped, he goes off the deep end and goes a little crazy. And I think we can all relate to that just a little bit, but it is interesting nonetheless. But in any case, yeah, that's my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well if you want to help support the show. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So just be sure to go check this out. Link is down in the description and also on the end screen. And speaking of the end screen, if you want to see more videos from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked inside end screen. The top video is the most recent one, whereas the bottom video is based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!